Hey there, Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement and bringing you another edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, where I take a concept, a strategy, something that we use in autism fitness to great success to provide meaningful and effective fitness and adapted PE programs for our autism and neurodivergent life skill athletes. And of course, bring it to you in a way that is usable, in a way that is productive. So before we get started, please definitely subscribe so you don't miss any of these videos, and share this edition or any edition with someone for whom it might make a great difference in their being able to deliver high quality, measurable results for their autism and neurodivergent life skill athletes. In this edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, we're going to be talking about contingencies, which are kind of 101 academic when we are developing and implementing programs, but you may be surprised to learn how they can be used to absolutely optimize programming, not only from the physical performance perspective, difficult to say 3 P words in a row, but also from the adaptive or motivation perspective as well, in addition to lowering anxiety for our athletes, and many of them are prone to being anxious, especially when it is a new situation, new environment, new coach, a lot of new stuff also, and it can be overwhelming, it can be anxiety provoking. So using contingencies is in a variety of different ways can be very productive in alleviating that anxiety and making a more productive session for you and for your athlete as well. So first of all, what is a contingency? A contingency is the sequential relationship between two things that are happening, two events. And oftentimes, particularly in the science and practice of applied behavior analysis, we're utilizing these situationally to denote a task or an activity with a period of reinforcement or a preferred activity. However, they don't always need to be that extreme, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So for many of our athletes, because they're prone to anxiety, giving them an idea very specifically of what is going to happen during the fitness session, so where they are going, who they are going to be interacting with, what they are going to be doing, even down to the equipment. We can get as specific as the number of sets and maybe even repetitions of an exercise. Oftentimes we can utilize a social narrative or a social story for that athlete, especially those individuals who do really well knowing in advance, 24, 48, even 72 hours before they have that event, particularly when it's something new. So if this is an athlete's first fitness session, then we might want to get them some information, if that's something that works really well for them, about what's going on and what the expectations are. Ultimately, what a contingency does is it not only gives an idea of what's happening and when, but it also provides the context and the expectations around what those events and what those situations and what those expectations are, because they may be very unclear for that athlete, especially in those initial few sessions. So we don't want to assume that the athlete is thinking the exact same way and the exact same things that we are, theory of mind being what it is, and we want to provide them with as much information as going to be useful and helpful and anxiety reducing for them as possible. Now, when we get into the session, and this is another thing that oftentimes is very well bolstered by having a visual schedule, whether it's text or even utilizing pictures of what's happening, when it's happening, and what's happening after that in that sequence. This gives the athlete not only an idea of what's going to be happening and when, but it can also give them a sense of ownership. In addition to contingencies, we have another one of our C words, which is choice. We can add choice in, and that gives our athlete a good amount of autonomy in what exercise do you want to do first. So do you want to do push throws first, or do you want to do overhead throws first? And they can select or check off that exercise on that board, and maybe we need to switch it around a little bit for them. But that choice is also playing into and having a direct impact on the sequence of exercises. So in programming, it really, most of the time, does not matter which exercise the athlete is going to start with in that block, whether it's warm-up or power or strength. It just matters that they are starting, that they are going to initiate the exercise. So if we give them choice over which exercise of 2 or maybe at most 3 they want to do first, that gives them an option, and it also puts it into that contingency. So that contingency is now a when-then. So when you complete those 3 sets of push throws, then you can take a break, or then you can get water if you need it, or then we can move on to overhead throws. So it doesn't always need to be a contingency that is rooted in an exercise followed by a reinforcer, although many times that is the case. So when you complete these sandbell slams, then you can take a break, or when you complete these sandbell slams, then we can talk about trains, boats, Pokemon, whatever it is. So setting that up as a noted contingency that contains or is encapsulating the sequence, meaning first this, the exercise or activity, and then access to that reinforcer or preferred activity. A contingency does not always necessarily need to have a secondary reinforcer. It could simply be, well, first you have squats and then you're going to do overhead presses. So we're not starting overhead presses until squats are completed. However, that's the sequence that we're utilizing right now. And it can be for the 2 exercises. It can be for the entire day's program as well. Another note of importance is sometimes when we have an athlete who is either getting agitated or distracted or is having a real challenge with a particular exercise, we may decide to use in Autism Fitness what we call the Monique rule. Monique Preble, one of our Autism Fitness Master Pros, modify or move on. So a modification is a simplification or a reduction in challenge of a particular exercise. And of course, that's going to vary exercise by exercise. Sometimes we may have a contingency in place. It may be, okay, first set of 10 squats, and then modified push-ups, or then doing push-ups. And the athlete is really struggling and getting distracted or getting dysregulated when they're performing those squats. So we have a decision to make. And of course, context is going to matter a lot here about that particular athlete, about what's going on in the situation, what might be going on internally for them, what the prior history is. But let's say we've determined that the athlete is getting dysregulated and that continuing squats right now is not the best idea. It's not in the best interest of the athlete or their performance, or the overall quality of the session right now. So we can jump over to, not literally, of course, although with some athletes, maybe, we can jump over to the push-ups, and we might say something like, and this is where language becomes really critical, we might say, hey, let's try those 3 magic words that we use in Autism Fitness. Let's try this. Let's try push-ups, and then we can come back to squats. So even though the when-then, that contingency was initially squats and then push-ups, we can make a determination in that moment that it's probably best off to go to the squats and then come back to those, go to the push-ups and then come back to the squats, because that's going to enable the athlete to self-regulate and do a different exercise, and then maybe come back calmer and more focused when it's time to do squats again. So even though that contingency was set in the start, it may be time to change it around just a little bit. But these are more finite, more individualized things that, even though there are best practices for, is really going to be a best judgment call for the coach. Understanding that athlete, understanding that athlete's predispositions, understanding how that athlete will best thrive during that session. So all of these other small but important details around the athlete's adaptive functioning are also going to have a major implication on their performance or their physical functioning as well. So considering again the contingency and that it's not always just a first do this, then do that, first do this, then do that, but the way that we utilize it in the session can take a couple different forms. It does not have to always have to be a first do this and then you get reinforced. It can be more subtle than that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be first do this and then reinforcer. It could just be the sequence of exercises, especially as behavior-specific praise becomes more reinforcing for that athlete as well, because ultimately we want to make the session as naturalistic for the athlete while still providing all of the adequate and necessary supports for them physically, adaptively, and cognitively as possible. So I hope this has shed a little bit of light and provided a little bit of maybe new or maybe rekindled interest or information in contingencies and how truly important they are for our autism and neurodivergent athletes, and just any athlete in general. You know, letting your athlete know what's going on, regardless of whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, is probably a good idea. I've never had an athlete just say, well, surprise me with everything. When we know what's coming next, we generally have a better opportunity to focus and dial into that particular exercise, which means that the outcome physically is probably going to be a little bit or a lot bit better. I'd love to know what you think of this. Leave your ideas, your feedback, something you've gotten or taken away from this in the comments below. If there's a topic you'd like me to cover in a future edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday Training, leave that in the comments below also. I'd love to see it. And of course, it helps the algorithm. I'm Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, leading the movement for movement. Thank you for